Lots of people under
After the
evacuation
recent
orders
mass
tonight.
Why? Nobody has answered for that.
Imagine that is now taken away from you.
These are the faces of some of the biggest news stories in America.
We want justice!
Where's the compassion?
They need to think about what happened.
George Floyd!
Faces that over time faded from the headlines as attention turned elsewhere. Now we're putting the spotlight back on them. Standing across the street here in Surfside, Florida, today, nearly 3 years after the collapse, just passing by, you would never know what happened here if you didn't know what you were looking for. Each week, we're traveling to places home to major news stories you may remember.
Everything you work for, just all gone.
And introducing you to people who say it's important you get the full story.
When you have an understanding with a community, people come together.
We're here to support them in this crisis time.
Because we often don't fully learn the impact of an event.
Almost 3 years later, we have no answers.
Until we look at it in hindsight. I remember being here in the days after the building collapsed, this entire area filled with first responders. Today, though, it's really quiet. You see the barrier that's around the property. You could pass it by and not know what happened here.
Thursday, June 24, 2021.
Sir?
I'm sorry.
What's going on? Tell me exactly what happened.
I don't know. There's a lot of smoke going on. I can't see right now.
You see smoke?
Get out of here.
Thursday, June 24.
No, Mom, relax. Relax. Take a deep breath. Relax, baby. Mom, not. We're here. Let's take, Mom. We got us. Mom, relax. Take a deep breath. Look at that smile. Mom. Jesus! It's earthquake outside! Earthquake! You gotta open up. Hurry up.
Thursday, June 24.
You can get electrocuted. Go back to our apartment. At least our apartment is safe.
I can't stay here. We can't see a thing. It's all smoke here.
Thursday, June 24.
Okay. No, a building.
You need to find your closest stairs. 01:28 and 23 seconds. Thursday, June 20. Thursday, 24.
Yes, someone's going to take us. What's going on here? You gotta get us out of here.
Let me know. I'll stay on the phone with you until I know that you're out. I'm still here with you, okay?
Here's the sign honoring the lives that were lost in the building collapse. And one thing, it's overwhelming, honestly, is the age numbers that you see. Some people elderly, this person 80 years old, 21 years old, even as young as 5 years old. Really speaks to how this tragedy impacted so many people.
It's hard to think of. She was everything to me. It was my only older sister, and he became a brother to me as well.
Martin Langesfeld's sister Nicole and brother-in-law Louis Sadovnik were among the 98 lives lost in the collapse of Champlain Towers South. The couple met while studying at the University of Florida. They'd been married 6 months when the building collapsed.
And growing up with Nikki, for those who have siblings, they know you fight for very dumb things, and it's just brotherly love. At the end of the day, that person is the person you call when you're fighting with your parents, when You need answers, and if they're your older siblings, you trust them with everything. It wasn't just her, it was her husband as well that would have given her life for her, and they were taken together. Their dog. The fact of the matter is, this just shouldn't have happened. I shouldn't have to stand here and remember growing up and playing soccer with her and remember the runs and the marathons we used to do. I shouldn't need to do that.
We do not know how full the building was when this horrendous collapse happened in the pre-dawn hours, and one cannot even begin to imagine the horror of people as this collapse occurred in the deep of night.
Scripps News West Palm Beach anchor Michael Williams has covered the stories impacting South Florida for parts of 5 decades.
I covered 9/11. I was up there within 48 hours of 9/11. And it was one of the images I can never shake of loved ones walking around with pictures of their loved ones in New York City. And I remember seeing something similar here, people walking around, holding on to hope. Maybe there's more survivors. Maybe somebody in that rubble surviving. And as days kept going on and you knew that wasn't going to be possible, it was just a heart-wrenching scene day after day after day.
My grandmother was found 6 days later. She was the 12th person found on day number 6.
Hilda Noriega was the oldest victim at 92 years old. Her grandson, Michael, called her the matriarch and heart and soul of their family. How long did your grandmother live in the building?
20 years.
Do you remember, I mean, I'm sure you visited her often. I guess, what was it like inside of there? What was her home like? What do you remember about it?
She was always cooking. She was, you know, Miami's abuela. She was a Cuban grandmother that took so much pleasure in just cooking for her family, cooking for her grandkids. I stand by the fact that this shouldn't have happened. It should never happen again. And there was 98 lives that were lost that could have easily been prevented.
Nearly 3 years after the collapse, the federal report from the National Institute of Standards and Technology is still being written. It may come out in 2024. It may not be until 2025. The land where the building once stood has been sold. Developers are planning new condos at the same time as families and town officials are planning a permanent memorial.
It's hard because everyone's life goes on when bad things happen, and when you're put in a situation like this, or when something happens to your family members, you realize your life, it's going to go on, but that pain is going to stay with you. And it's as if that night a piece of you was ripped off. But almost 3 years later, we don't have any answers. Why did a building collapse in the middle of the night in one of the most prestigious cities? Who were the inspectors? How did this happen? Is there oversight? There's no oversight in condo boards.
I do think that people really are anxious to find out. There's no closure, but people, many of them, desperately want to see the ultimate final report on what a federal group of experts, some of the best in the world, have to ultimately say about what caused this, and then hope that that will lead to even more change to make sure it doesn't happen again.
There's so many people who will watch this who have dealt with grief in some form. How have you navigated the grief of losing your grandmother?
It's been like a wrestling match where you feel like you're losing most of the time. See, from my grandmother's perspective, I was born in a time that her daughter passed away 6 months after I was born. So I symbolized new life in a time of death for her. And she used to tell me all the time, and I never appreciated it because I never understood it, but she would always say, "You saved my life. You saved my life." And I'm thinking to myself, I was a baby pooping my pants like every other baby, how did I save your life? And I came to realize in her death, now that she's gone, that she saved my life. I totally see what she means, but it's because she had shown me such an unconditional, overwhelming love that I can't, the best way to honor her life is to pour that out onto others.
And there were 2 towers. Did the second one?
The second one is that one with the blue balconies over there.
Oh, so they weren't
Not
right
this
next
one,
to each other.
the third one.
And that's exactly what the building.
The other one.
Oh, even beyond that. Oh, that one.
It looks they were exactly the same. They're twin
That's
towers.
exactly the same.
There's 3 of them. So this one wasn't remodeled yet.
And
that's what I was going to
people still live in this building and built exactly the same way?
By the same people. Exactly the same.
The condo collapse in Surfside, Florida is in many ways an unprecedented event in U.S. history. It created doubt for both people living in Florida and for people in similar high-rises across the country.
It was really one of those circumstances where you say, I've never seen anything like this. Buildings that collapse for no apparent reason. There's no hurricane, there's no wind force, there's no huge snowstorm, there's no blast, there's no identifiable outward agent. Buildings just don't collapse like that.
Dennis Hector is part of the faculty at the University of Miami's School of Architecture. He's considered an expert on hazard mitigation building codes.
It's an L-shaped building, and one leg of the L starts to collapse and appears to collapse from the bottom up. So you see the top portion of the building staying whole and just collapsing down on top of the lower one. And the end cap, the end of the building, stood for, I don't know, 5-10 seconds, and then that collapses. That those aspects of the building, stairs, elevators, the continuous vertical solid pieces of the building, they did their job. I mean, in one case they kept one leg of the building up, and in the other case it was resisted for a while.
The federal investigation is focusing on several issues with the pool deck, which is believed to be the first part of the building to collapse. The main issue goes back to the way the deck was designed. This graphic shows every support column. The areas highlighted in red were severely deficient.
This is 1979, 1980, when this was, a less well-developed architectural and engineering arrangement.
Today, in many places, building codes are stricter. But a key theme of the federal investigation is whether a similar design mistake would be caught today. Recent building collapses in Iowa and the Bronx, New York were both blamed in part on poor oversight. Here is NIST's Jim Harris in June of 2023.
I do think a serious review of the status of quality assurance on design will be a subject of our recommendations, but it's early to say exactly how that's going to be formulated.
And fair enough, but that was a sense of my question, that was on your radar screen.
Oh, it's absolutely on the radar. Lots of mistakes were found.
The state of Florida has already taken action, passing new laws that require more frequent inspections of aging high-rises. New laws also force residents to put money into reserves to cover the cost of repairs, something that wasn't done at Champlain Towers South. As far as I know, you cover politics a lot in the state. What were the politics surrounding these new laws?
The politics at first, when what is now law was moving through the legislative session, at first it met resistance, and some arguing it went too far, others arguing it didn't go far enough. This is a debate that's still wide open. We're looking back in hindsight, but everybody's wondering, do we have enough foresight right now, politically and otherwise, to be doing what we need to do?
But then there's another context, and that is there something about the inherent to the sea, to the coastal environment? Should we be more cognizant and vigilant about saltwater corrosion of reinforced concrete?
NIST investigators found corroded steel at the site of the collapse. They're studying how much of an impact it had, while other researchers look at ways to stop corrosion from happening in similar buildings. At Florida International University, Dr. Atorud Azizinanami, or Dr. Z, is studying a different option for older buildings.
So if I have a, let's say, column in a building that is made of this right here, I can spray this on top of this, okay? I can spray it, and it's just like a sealing off, basically. Seal the system, and once you seal it, because nothing goes through it, then nothing's gonna go through it, so you won't have any corrosion problems, basically.
FIU researchers use a hose to spray the ultra-high performance concrete where it's needed. It's only been available in the US since the year 2000. The material is now being used in some DOT projects, including bridge rehab, but Dr. Z believes more can be done.
We can seal off, let's say, the columns in the basement where they're prone to the corrosion, for example, let's say. You gotta do that. You gotta do that. Be proactive. The cost of being proactive is much smaller than if a disaster happened and you try to go and fix something.
I think, Chris, as you well know, there's always part of our human psyche that says it's awful. The community wrapped the survivors in their arms and the memories of those who died here. But there's also that part, for everything they said, won't happen here. It can't happen here. And we tend to, perhaps so we can get by every day, tuck it away in our psyche. So I'd be remiss if I didn't tell you, I think there's always an element of that. Well, that happened, but what are the odds that it'll happen here? And so we all go about and live in high rises up and down the Florida coastline and around the nation, and perhaps put it in the back of our mind. But for those most directly affected and for the good of the safety of all of us, it's a story that needs to stay front of mind. Does it always? Those who argue that we haven't learned all the lessons from here would say we haven't done enough yet to make sure this stays front and center moving forward.
How do you keep it together?
I don't know. Honestly, I have no idea. I look back now at 2 years ago and I'm just like, how the hell did I do that? Even now, I'll look back and driving home and I'll say, how am I even doing this? I don't know.
In many ways, I'm sure there are times that you wish that there wasn't so many people calling you for this issue.
The day after the collapse, well, the morning of, I started getting, every family member started getting a lot of calls from reporters. The cameras, there were thousands of cameras, helicopters, drones, everything you can imagine was there. And very quickly I realized I can scream and 100 people can listen to me, or I can speak to a reporter on a camera where it can reach international exposure. And I also realized very quickly, people grieve differently. And it's hard to speak on this topic. It's hard to stand here right in front of where my family was killed. But someone has to do it.
Nearly 3 years after the collapse at Champlain Towers South, Martin Langesfeld is pushing for a permanent memorial to the victims. City leaders have promised to build one on 88th Street next to the site of the collapse. But the process has been slow. What do you hope that memorial looks like?
A place where you can go and remember not only your loved ones, but a place where people from out of town can come and realize what happened here. A place where you can go remember what you lost that night and why you lost it. Trying to think back at the memories, it's still hard over 2 years later to accept the fact that she was taken. Just someone that was always there for anyone. So just whatever you're feeling, to those who did lose loved ones in any way, it's okay to feel that. And it's okay, they're going to judge you anyways for when time goes on and they say, it's time to move on, life goes on. But yours doesn't, yours stops, and it's okay. That's one thing I had to learn.
And even after you've covered so much in your career, I mean, this is a story that sticks with you.
It does. It's, I don't know a reporter out here who at some point or another didn't shed a tear or more than a tear. And when you come back, whenever you see this, 98 souls lost their lives, how can you not be touched? We're all human beings. We have our jobs. For you and me, it's as journalists, but it's gut-wrenching and it always will be.
For me, personally, a memorial is not going to bring back my grandmother. But bringing the way that she lived into the lives of those around me, whether it's through personal relationships or through my book or through this interview, what I really want to be built in people is hope through other people. You know, when this collapse happened, I'll be honest with you, I haven't seen unity in a community like this since 9/11. Because every single politician that came here, every single family member, visitor, church, synagogue, you name it, all the nonprofit organizations, everybody was focused on finding a solution to a problem that didn't have a solution. So I will never stop talking. Maybe there will come a point where I talk way less about the way that she passed away, but I'll never stop talking about the way that she lived.